Thank you, Davey. The Diocese of Louisiana is very grateful for you and TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, for hosting this workshop this morning. Diocese of Louisiana, I am the chair, Father Robert Beasley, and Dean of the North Shore Deanery. I get to chair our Diocesan Stewardship Committee, handful of folks who are available to meet individually with vestries, congregations, and host these diocesan workshops at large. And we're excited that you all are joining us today. I know I've been in the diocese for about 5 years now, and it seems that recruitment and training is always on the forefront of what I hear and what I see in my own congregation. And so we're excited to have this workshop, have you all tune in and be a part of this work of the kingdom of God. So we're very grateful for your time this morning and look forward to seeing this impact our church and diocese.
Right on. Thank you for that welcome. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I'm the Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. I've been doing this ministry for about 4 years now, and if the pandemic taught us one thing, it was that we can get together on Zoom from anywhere and learn from each other and connect. So I'm glad to be joining you from my living room here in San Francisco, California. It's significantly earlier here than it is there, but I appreciate you all being up on a Saturday and joining this call. This is an ongoing partnership that we have with the Diocese of Louisiana, and I hope one of many ongoing webinars that we'll be able to do together. With that, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to start our presentation, and we'll see you on the other side. All right. So today we're going to talk, as we talk about recruiting and training a stewardship team, I want to go over a few things with you. Our learning objectives are to talk about, well, what does a stewardship committee do? Where does our work begin? Where does it end? What should we be focusing on? There are some obvious things in there, but there are maybe some surprises as well. We're going to be talking a little bit about jobs of committee members, different kinds of things that you can do, and the different kinds of skills that we look for when we build out a team. We're going to be talking, of course, about the theological formation. So not only do we need to, as stewardship folks, prepare a little for best practices and fundraising, but everything we do in church is built on our theology, on our gospel. And so we'll take a little look at some of the things that, and some of the places where we get that nourishment, that spiritual, theological nourishment for our work. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting. This is something that comes up all the time, a conversation between finance, vestry, and stewardship about how to set appropriate goals and how to declare what success is. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as we finish things up for today. As I said when I began, please feel free to ask questions at any time using the chat function. Type something in there. I'll take a look at it every once in a while. Or if there's something really burning and you want to ask a question, or you've got something great to share, raise your hand and that'll put a box around you and I'll be able to call on you and ask you for your question. Let's dig into this. So I want to make it clear that the stewardship team is not just the fundraising committee. We have, I think, as Episcopalians, become a little lazy in our use of the word stewardship to only mean the annual campaign or our fundraising effort, the pledge campaign. Stewardship is so much more than that. It's also about how we celebrate and appreciate all the gifts we've been given. When we talk about in stewardship time, talent, and treasure, or the other one, wealth, works, and wisdom, these are important things to remember that they are unified. We often just say, well, we talk about time, talent, and treasure, but we really care about the treasure. We care about all three of those, and all three of those are necessary components for how our congregations run. We need volunteers. We need leadership and wisdom. We need great ideas. We need people to roll up their sleeves, and we need their financial gifts. So it's really important that as a stewardship team, we're well versed in how to talk about how we share our gifts, how our gifts come from God, how we celebrate creation, how everything that we do is an expression of that gratitude, and that leads us into generosity. Those things and that mindset is what a stewardship team embodies. Of course, money will be raised because of our efforts, but it will be raised best when we understand the relationship between gratitude and generosity. And this is going to come up over and over as we talk about our theology. While your pledge campaign is the team that drives it is your practical team, hands-on, rolling up the sleeves, getting the job done. You are also ambassadors for the mission of the church. It's your job, it's our job to communicate what our theme is and to help plan how we're going to do this. That's not just how we roll out the campaign. That might be making suggestions to the education folks or the adult education people or even your clergy about different kinds of book studies you might do or the scripture exercises or other kinds of formation you might do throughout the year to get people in the mindset of generosity and gratitude. It's also your role, our role is to create materials. We have a whole session. In fact, if you want to stay on later today, we're going for another 2-hour webinar on specifically on creating compelling materials for your campaigns. And we're doing that for the whole church this morning at 9 o'clock Pacific time. But we'll be talking about, and it's really important that you take a role in designing the literature that goes along with your campaign. If that's a brochure, if those are pledge cards, if it's following a theme, put some real intention into it because that's important. If your materials look the same as they did the last year and the last 5 years or the last 10 years, it's really time for a refresh because your mission, your congregation, your ministry, your neighborhood isn't the same place as it was before the pandemic or 10 years ago. So change your materials and change your approach every once in a while. This helps people understand or reminds them that things are new and happening all the time. Work with everyone in your leadership, your treasurer, your communications team, your vestry, your clergy, to align your messaging. So if you're picking a theme or if you're picking an idea, whatever that through line is that goes through your fundraising, make sure everybody's speaking the same language, using the buzzwords or the mission focus, or if you focused on a goal or a particular set of ideas that you want to communicate this year, make sure everyone is on the same page so that your messaging can align from preaching to teaching to the ways we communicate with each other to the rollout of the campaign. Finally, our role in the stewardship is to actually run the campaign, to plan when it's going to happen, to structure it, to create whatever method we're going to use, if it's face-to-face or if it's small groups or if it's sending a letter or if it's passing it along. There's so many models of stewardship out there. Pick your model, test it out and go with it, but be aligned and be clear and set that early. That's why we're doing this conversation in May, to give you all time before the summer to think about this and how we want to run it. If there is going to be a party involved, either a kickoff or an in-gathering party or both, don't have the whole committee work on that. Assign a subcommittee to work on your event. In my experience working with volunteers across churches and also in nonprofits, everybody wants to plan the party, and sometimes it'll take up everybody's time and attention. And then the other parts of the campaign that need to be run, people will have less energy for. So if you're going to do a party, which I fully recommend, assign that to a nice subcommittee. Trust them with making color choices and food choices and other things like that. The best way to recruit someone to serve on the stewardship committee is to ask them and ask them one-on-one, to have it be a meaningful ask, not a hurried conversation in the receiving line. Not, don't pull someone aside when they're on their way somewhere else, but really take the time to invite them to think about serving on the stewardship committee. Recruit people who have real time to do this work and a real interest to do this work. In a couple minutes, we're going to go into some of the real specifics on people who are naturals in a stewardship team. So we'll take a look at that. If you have to use the phone, that's fine. If you can find some one-on-one time to do it. And the reason I suggest this is because the more seriously you treat the recruitment process, the more you'll communicate how important this ministry is to the church. A lot of times stewardship gets kind of shuffled off behind the scenes until it has its big moment in your campaign at the end of the year, because we feel some kind of shame or weirdness about talking about money in church. And we're going to go through some strategies about why it's okay to talk about money in church. But let's be really in the light with our stewardship conversations. Invite people into a process and into a team that's going to be beautiful for them. It's not just a hard work. It's also going to be life-changing and energy giving. I often get asked, how big should your stewardship team be? And I think this is a contextual response. And it depends on the kind of method that you use in your fundraising. If you are we like to give everyone a call and ask them to make their gift or visit with everyone one-on-one, then you're going to need enough people on your team so that they can effectively manage that process. If you have, let's say, 200 pledging units to contact, you're going to need a pretty big stewardship team if you want to get all those phone calls or all those one-on-one meetings scheduled within the 4 to 6 weeks, 8 weeks of a campaign. So think about that when you're setting your campaign team. What's your approach going to be? If it's intensive in communication, then you need more people to do that, because one person can't manage more than 10 households. That, it gets pretty overwhelming pretty quickly. But if you're using different models, letters or small groups or other things like that, then you might be able to do this work with a smaller team. And I obviously realize that some of our churches are small and that all 6 volunteers show up for everything. There are your stewardship, they're your vestry, they're the potluck committee. So use the time wisely with the people that you have. According to the recently retired Bishop of Nevada, he reminds us that our stewardship committees should be in place by Easter. This is something I have never managed in my own church, but I think it's a really good thing to strive for. This is because an effective team will raise more money. They'll have more time to think about it, to bond as a committee. They're ambassadors for all the things that your church does together, and they will help carry the message forward about the impact of your ministry. This project is also a chance for the members of the team to form a cohort, a family of themselves, right? It's hard work to ask for money. Sometimes there are awkward or difficult moments, and having a team that you trust, that you've become vulnerable with, that you like to do this work with, is really important. So spend a little time as people who lead this ministry in your church, really doing some of that formational work of team building, of, why are we all here? How do we get to know each other? How do we form that trust? Because fundraising in church is not easy. Finally, your stewardship committee, they are optimistic, they are happy, they are excited, they are filled with the light and the love of the ministry that your church is doing, and they will send that message back out to the congregation. Your stewardship committee shouldn't be the group of folks who's going around hearing why everybody's upset with the church or things they want to change. Your stewardship committee should be the folks that are talking about everything that's really going well in your church and asking questions in an appreciative way. What do you love about the congregation? What's your favorite ministry? How do you feel on Sundays when you walk out to the parking lot? Do you feel energized? Do you feel ready for your week? Those kinds of questions really get people thinking about the positive aspects of their community. There are other groups that are concerned with problems that might arise or struggles or challenges. Let the vestry handle those things. Your stewardship committee is about it's team mission. Get out there and share the love. You want to recruit people who know people. This is really important on your stewardship team. So people who are well connected in the church, people who know lots of folks, you see them at coffee hour. They're going around from person to person, checking in with each other. They have strong, warm relationships with a number of people. Those are great people to serve on a stewardship team, because a lot of what we do in stewardship is relationship. And when you can ask someone to join you in a ministry and to be authentic with you about what's going on, then you have this natural bridge that forms. So recruit people who like and know people in your congregation. Diversify your team to represent your congregation's diversity. So that's to say, make sure that you have a spread of folks that match the gender and the identity and the age of people in your congregation. Invite some younger folks, invite some people who have been around for a long time, those people who have those strong relationships in church. Make sure if you have multiple services that your stewardship committee is made up of people from all services. So sometimes, the later service might have more energy, but it's the early service that has more people who volunteer. And so if you make your stewardship committee out of 8 o'clockers and then the 11 o'clockers have no representation, you're missing out some of those important relationships that might develop. So make sure you recruit from multiple services. Invite people to serve on the stewardship team who express clearly that they love the community, and not just in their words, but in their actions. They've been faithful, they show up, they have that spirit of welcome and love and nurturing. These are great people to invite to be a part of your stewardship team. You're just going to bring that love into your process, into the way you communicate. And how they feel about it, how the congregation, that light will radiate out, and they will share that with people. People will be able to see how much they love the church. Not everybody is born to raise money. Let's just be clear about that. Some people have a real fear of it or an aversion to it. And so don't put them on this committee. I know sometimes this happens a lot in nonprofit boards. They'll put new people on the development or the fundraising team to give them this window into how the organization works. Sometimes in churches we're like that too. New vestry members, you should serve on the stewardship committee for a time. What if they hate it? What if they have a terrible experience? What if they think asking for money is the worst possible thing on their list of things to do? So we should invite people on the stewardship committee who like this work, who care about this work, or who are eager to learn it. So we might not all be natural born fundraisers. I know I wasn't. It was not on my list of things I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was a boy, but I really love that I've learned this skill and can share it with the church. So also find those people who say, I'm curious about this. Maybe I'd be good at it. How can I get involved in the stewardship committee? Finally, rounding out your team, pick a good chair, someone who can bring people together, who will set meetings frequently, who won't drop the ball, someone you can count on. Pick people who have real credibility. You know this in the congregation. There are people who are so wise that people go to them for advice. They're always the one with the good idea. Maybe they're not like loud leaders, but they're supportive leaders in a way. Those people have really strong credibility. One of a person like that might serve really well on your stewardship team. People with time. So my first rule in team building is if you want something done, ask a busy person to do it because they know how to manage their time well. But in these days, we can get too busy, and that can be a real problem. So if folks on your stewardship team say, I really want to do this, but I'm going to be traveling for business the entire month of October when the campaign's happening, say, maybe not this year. This is not your year to serve on stewardship. We'd rather have you be a part of some other ministry. Recruit people who have real time to give this, because when the campaign's in its full swing, it takes a lot of time and energy to do it right. So someone who is scattered, running away, sorry, not running away, but running headlong into business or travel or family, if you know that they've got just a lot going on, they might not be the right person at that time. Now, maybe that's seasonal. Maybe it's only every once in a while that they run into intense periods. That's something you can talk about with them, see how it matches their lives. This is the most important thing. People who already make gifts to the church of time, talent, and treasure are people that you want to serve on this committee. There is nothing more hollow or false than somebody asking you to join a ministry if they haven't yet done it themselves or don't make a gift themselves. Serving on a stewardship committee but not giving is like anachronistic. We really need folks to be able to step up to that. In fact, I think that on the Sunday you launch your campaign, all of your leadership should have already made their gifts to the campaign. Your clergy, your vestry, your stewardship committee, those gifts should have been made already. Those forms filled out so that on the first Sunday you can say, we're already 10%, 15% into our goal, or we have 100% commitment from our leadership. This is really important because it adds that validity to it. It is so much easier to ask someone to join you in making a gift than it is just to ask them to make a gift if you haven't. So the first rule in fundraising is make your gift first. That's a little bit about the team. Now let's do a little work on how we talk about money in church. And I first want to start that by one of my favorite statistics, which is that Jesus spends 40% of his ministry, 40% of his time talking about money. 16 of the 40 parables that we have are about money, possessions, stuff, and our attachments to them. Jesus uses money either as the metaphor or the subject of his parables over and over again for a good reason. First, I think it's to remind us that money plays a role whether we want it to or not. It plays a big role in our lives, in our relationships, and how we feel. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute about the pastoral implications of that. But it's just a reminder that, you know, as much as we want to eschew attachments and be spiritual beings, we're also tied to the world through money in many ways. Our mortgages, our the needs of our family, our own ideas of success, just living in a modern society. So this was true in the first century as it is now true still in the 21st century. So Jesus knew this. He also knows that it's a way in and a way out of community for some people. And it plays that big role in, it can cause division and it can help with unity. So I think Jesus spends a lot of time coaching us on how to approach money and how to think about money. This is all to tell you, remind you that it's okay for us to talk about money and meaning when it's in good relationship. When we're talking about the gifts that we have to do the work of the church, when we're encouraging people to be supportive, when it slips into that guilt or that manipulative place, then we know we're off base. We're off base with our message. You never want to say give till it hurts in church. What you want to say is give in measure of your joy. Experience the love of this community and express it through the way you give back your time, talent, and treasure. So, enough about that. Money in church, it's okay to talk about it. Let's talk about a couple of places where um, we might be experiencing challenges this year. I know the pandemic is officially over. That was a lovely thing for this week. But there are still challenges in employment, in how our communities were shaken up. And now we have, new economic turmoil, this recession they keep promising us, inflation. So there are some challenges, and people might be thinking about that as we move into this stewardship year. The first thing I want to remind us is that there is never any time, any shame for pledging less this year to the campaign than you did last year. We should make it just a normative thing that it's okay to make. We trust you pray over your gift and you make the right gift for you and your household in measure of the ways you've received. And so there's no shame if you have to say this year I've got to give less or whatever. We understand that. So let's go into it with that goodwill, that intention that everybody's making a prayer-filled, prayerful gift. Remember, not everybody struggles in the same way. Maybe some households, in fact, aren't struggling. Maybe they get their assets from a different place than employment, or they have their income comes from a different source. So maybe not everybody is going through the same thing. Maybe they're employed by a different industry and it's not impacted in the same way as other people in the congregation. So this is to say, don't assume just because there are news headlines that things are bad or that some people in the church are expressing struggle, that everyone is expressing struggle. Some households might in fact be able to give more than they did last year or participate more fully in the campaign in other ways. Every conversation we have about money in church is pastoral. And this goes back to what I was saying about the role money plays in our lives. It's about our success and failure. It's about our ability to support our families and ourselves in retirement. It's about how we dream and imagine. It's also how we feel shame and guilt sometimes. So there's a lot of stuff on money. And so when we have conversations with each other about making our gifts to the church, you might start hearing things from people that aren't just about their money, that are about the rest of their lives, that are about things going on in their lives. So be ready for that. Know that you might be going into some sensitive conversations and have the skills you need to pastorally work through that with a person. This isn't to say you're there to give them spiritual advice. You're not, unless you're their clergy person. You're there to walk with them in that journey and hear what they have to say if they want to share it. That said, there needs to be some reciprocity, some check-in with our clergy about the people that we're going to talk to about making stewardship gifts. I always like to run my list of households past the priest before I make my calls and say, I don't want to know any details, obviously, and you can't share them, but is there anyone on this list that is sensitive? Maybe we should approach in a different way. You might know things about them that I don't know. And so I just want to make sure before I go in and ask them to contribute and be positive that this is an appropriate conversation. That's a really good check-in because often people will tell the clergy things before they tell the rest of the congregation, or maybe we'll never know what's going on in their lives. And so it's just a good place to check in. You don't need to know details, just say, no, hold back this time, or be gentle, or here's what I would expect, whatever you want. The same thing is true when we learn things in a conversation. about where someone is, because sometimes they'll say, I'm not giving any money this year because I'm really mad at the church, or I'm not giving because you know my my wife got a cancer diagnosis and our family's in turmoil right now. That's a moment for you to go back to the clergy, and you don't have to say everything. We can hold confidences, but you might be able to say, you should give Davy a call. There's something going on with him. Maybe he would really appreciate you reaching out. Or there's a bridge to mend there. Why don't you're not doing their job for them, but there's a reciprocity and a relationship between us, because in this moment of talking about money and meaning, we're being pastoral. So help everybody do that job. I also want to remind us that we've been through bad times before. I know that 2008, 2009, 2010 are a long time ago in our short memories, but we were in a horrible recession as a country and we got through it. We recovered and we moved past it, and things returned to a new normal. And whatever we're going through now will also end and we'll come back into a new place. This isn't to say everything's going to be okay. Don't worry your pretty little head, but it is to say we know that we've been through cycles and we'll get through them, we'll move past them, and it's okay this year if we need to change things up or change our expectations. Christians are, after the end of the day, people of hope. This is our biggest gift to the world. We bring hope and newness and a promise and assurance that things will be okay. All shall be well. I want to talk a little bit also about what might happen if your congregation is facing a budget cut or a program cut or a staff reduction going into this year's campaign. Sometimes, that word gets out, we're going to have to cut the hours of our youth person or our parish administrator, or that program we really love, we're not going to be able to do in the same way. But you still need to run your campaign. You still need to raise money for the operation of the church, even though there are some things that people are going to be afraid of or not like. So keep your conversation really focused on the mission. Be mission focused. Talk about the things you are doing. Talk about the ways that if you are making a change to a program, we're going to need to rely more heavily on gifts and volunteers to make that happen. So talk about the positive things of your mission. And also, our clergy, our vestry, they might have someone or maybe a couple of families in mind for that really big gift that they're going to ask them for one day when they need to do some great work on the church, or maybe start a capital campaign, or maybe create a new program. And they've been saving this family up. We don't want to ask too much because I know I'm going to hit them up for $50,000 at some point, to do this big project, or whatever is a big number, $10,000, whatever it is. But this might be the time to ask them for the gift. This operation year in the church, if you are struggling, if you're trying to deliver a program in the midst of turmoil, this might be the time to ask those families to make that big step up gift. Finally, how do we deal with stewardship when times are uncertain? And this goes back to being people of hope. We are born out of uncertainty. If you read, as we are right now in the Easter season, the book of Acts, it's beautiful in that the Holy Spirit's flying all over the Middle East and doing great work. And you can see the emerging problems of the church in chaos and in turmoil and in persecution. So we started in a world of uncertainty, and that has never ended. In some way, we're always uncertain of what's coming next. So church has developed really good skills to talk about the future and to make people feel okay with what's going on right now. And that's by focusing on what we can do, the work that we can do right now, the mission we can accomplish. It's an important reminder that you can change your pledge at any point in the year. And I hope that people don't, but we should let people know when they're on the fence, oh, I really want to make that gift, but I feel like I'm worried about it, or I'm not sure if I'm going to have my job next year. You can say, do what you can, but you can change your gift. It's just a phone call or an email to the treasurer. It's so simple, and no one will give you any grief about it. We just want you to be able to make the gift that means the most to you and that works with your family and your household and your budget. Let's talk now, moving into how we form our team. Our team, our stewardship team, they are the folks who carry the message of the joy of your mission and your ministry out into your community. We all take part in that. And your stewardship team, we as stewardship folks have a particular role in talking about that. One of the resources that I like to use in small groups to become kind of safe and vulnerable and trusting with each other is this tool that TENS has called the Money Autobiography. It kind of works through a series of questions that your stewardship team could talk about, and some of them are really difficult. Some of them are hard questions, but they get right to the stuff that we have about money and how we talk about it, how we feel about it, so that we can process that before we go and ask people to join us in making a gift. This is a really great tool, and I recommend it. You see the link there. I'll send the link also when I send the materials to you. Your relationship to your own money is a mirror into you. It When we think about our budget or our own stuff about money, what do you see when you see a reflection? When you look into that money mirror, when you look at yourself and your choices, do you see positive or negative experiences? Do you feel excited or safe? Do you feel shame or struggle? And none of those are necessarily bad. They're who you are and what you're feeling. Knowing it, being able to identify it, or working through anything before you engage others in the ministry of fundraising is really important, because how we feel about our own money is how we project onto others how they feel about their money. That may or may not be a useful tool. So we all relate to it. We use our money to express all kinds of things. And so when we use a tool or when we work out our own stuff in the stewardship team about money, we're then able to get past it and share the joy sort of unadulterated with our community. And this is really important, I think. So this is one of the questions that comes for it from that tool. It asks us, to explain or discuss how our role, our view of money changed as we moved through our lives. So, when you were a teenager and your money was coming from your first job or from your parents, how did you treat money? How did you think about money? When you started to have to pay for your own bills, what was that like? When you started to remember that you were going to retire one day and should start saving, what was that like? And how did that change your relationship with money? These questions that we can ask help and talk about in community, small group, help us realize what our own relationship is. And then when we approach people who are in different stages of their lives in the church, we have a little empathy for what they're going through. We understand maybe a little bit more what stories are. I want to move us now into why the stewardship team should be a part of setting goals for the church and for the budget. One of the things that I resent as a stewardship committee member often is being told by the vestry or the finance committee what my goal is to raise this year. And I think it should be very much the other way around. I think the stewardship team should get involved early in saying, well, what do we think we can do? This includes analyzing the last year or a couple years of campaign data I realize that in the pandemic, we're going to have some weird numbers there for a couple years, but we need to know what has happened and what the trend is. Where are we looking with our giving? This is really important because if the stewardship team can say, well, last year, this is what we heard and saw, and this is how people were working, they can help the finance team or the vestry or both make an appropriate goal. Do you have goals for other things in your church besides money that's going to be raised? Your stewardship committee can help with that too. Because remember, in the campaign, we're going to be having conversations with people one-on-one about their gifts to church. And so if one of the things you need is volunteers to run a program, that's a conversation that your stewardship committee can bring to the people they speak with. We really need some folks to show up at 10 o'clock on Saturdays sometimes to run this program, or, we're really trying to get a youth basketball league up. Do you know anyone that we can talk to? How can we involve that? If you ask your stewardship committee to be involved in the other goals the church has, they're going to have those conversations. They can bring that back to the committees that are appropriate and get those ministries some more people or some more resources or more connection to the community. Your goals should be achievable. So don't set a goal. Sometimes the vestry will say, we're in really bad shape and we need everyone to step it up 25% next year. That's an impossible goal, right? So maybe we got a cost of living increase. Maybe it was 3 or 4% if we were lucky. We did not get a 25% raise last year. So how are we going to give 25% more of our income? That's stretching too much. So set goals that are achievable for your congregation, that make sense. Another wise piece of advice I got early on in my fundraising career is don't ask for money that you don't absolutely need. Know where every dollar is being spent. Don't just ask people to dig deeper so that there can be more money, but really tie it to mission and ministry and what's happening. We need more gifts because we're growing the youth program, because we really hope to spruce up the parish hall this year, because we want to hire a new associate or a new staff position. Our choir really needs some help. We need our gifts to step up. Have some real ministry and mission goals in mind when you ask people to increase. You can also have different sorts of goals to give the campaign success. Like 50% of givers will increase next year. That's a great goal to say. So you can achieve that, right? If half your list gives $1 more, you've achieved some success. And at your in-gathering, you can say, look at what we did. We were able to have this many increases from last year. That's a great metric to talk about. Or maybe it's including people who have never made a gift before, whether those are newcomers or people who just have never pledged or who have been sort of on the periphery of giving. We're going to get a couple of new gifts this year, and that's our goal. And you can report on that. That feels successful, no matter what your goal was and no matter how much money you raised. There are these other metrics of success you can talk about that make people feel like the campaign was worth doing. And they are worth doing. They're really worth doing. So a few more thoughts. Maybe you have yet even other goals that you'd like your stewardship committee to help you with. How do we welcome new families or ask for new families? So again, this is that moment when people are having one-on-one conversations. They might say, do you know anyone who you might bring to church? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about spreading the word, bringing them along to our pancake feed or our chili supper or our other efforts that we do throughout the year to raise awareness and raise community? You can ask them to think about who they might invite. That plants a seed that there's more than just their financial gifts that are needed from the congregation, but it's their job to help the congregation grow and get new members and develop new relationships in the community. Maybe there are other things that you find, like maybe someone says as they're talking to you, our newsletter could use some help. You might say, do you want to help with it? Do you know anyone who's better at writing a newsletter than we are? How can we involve you? That would be great. Thank you for that suggestion. Or somebody who's like, your website's always out of date. Would you like to be on the team that helps update the website and think about it? So these are all opportunities for people to engage in the ministry that you're doing. As stewardship committee members, when you hear that kind of feedback, just ask, okay, I'm here also to talk about your time and your talent. What do you want to do? We have a job for you and we can find a way to make that happen. Here are a few more things that you can put in your plan. Maybe this is for clergy, or maybe this is for the stewardship chair. I'd like to say, I'm going to check in just to get a broad measure of who my people are in the church and what they're giving. I'm going to check in with the 5 highest and 5 lowest givers. And I'm not going to tell them why I'm doing it. They're not going to know that they're high or low. Maybe they will, but that's not why I'm getting them together or talking to them. What I want to know is, why do you give? What motivates you? What does this gift mean to you? Is this an important gift? Is it a gift that you have to pray about and think about? Is it a sacrificial gift? I just want to learn from you about your giving and why. Why do you care so much about this church that you give us money? You can get some really great feedback from and stories about mission and stories about participation that you can then say, you just told me something really great. Can I share that? Can we put that in the newsletter? Can we talk about it next year when we run the campaign? This was a really beautiful story and I would love for you to be able to tell it. Maybe ask someone from your diocese or from TENS to come and do a sermon or to lead a webinar or a workshop or something on stewardship in your church. This might be something that your stewardship committee could work on, bringing in a speaker or some extra people. We're so bad at listening to our own voices. I think there's a scripture there about, the prophet in their hometown being ignored and mistreated, right? So often when it's our own voices telling us what we should do, we ignore them. But when we bring in an outsider to say the very same thing, people listen with new ears and new attention. So maybe your stewardship committee could be thinking about, who might we bring in? And that could be someone just from your neighboring congregation. How do you do things there? This is what we found really works. Here's how we energize our community. And because it's coming from a different voice, people hear it differently. Maybe do a little book study, maybe do a Bible study on stewardship. These kinds of things, whether in your group or for the whole congregation, make you able to help make people make their best gifts and underscore that relationship between generosity and gratitude. Finally, lean on your treasurer or your parish administrator to send out those pledge statements every once in a while. I like to say quarterly, but I realize that's a lot of work in some churches. So at least once throughout the year, send a pledge statement. Or you can get around this sometimes by just in your newsletter or in your bulletin, publishing a snapshot. Here's the year-to-date budget. Here's where we're on track or off track. Here's what we said we were going to do in pledges, and here's where we are today. And you don't have to say anything else about it. You're just presenting numbers, letting people see, oh, we're on track, we're not on track. Maybe I should write that check that I've been forgetting to do. It helps people remember. It also underscores that we're good stewards of their giving, that we're doing things all year long to grow the ministry and to work in the ministry. And so their gifts matter. We're paying attention to the gifts that come in, how our money comes in, and how it gets spent. I want to end by introducing to you the theme that TENS has developed for this year's stewardship materials. And they are all up on our website, ready for you to download and use. Your diocese is a member of TENS, and so every congregation in the diocese can access this information for free. And this is really important. So this year we're talking about being rooted in our abundance and how we dig deep into the stories of generosity and our experience and our lives and our families, and how that helps inspire us through our faith to be generous and abundant people. So take a look at it. We have seasonal reflections for the big seasons of the church year. We have weekly reflections that tell a story of ministry and stewardship in the September, October, and November Sundays. There's a weekly reflection for each of those Sundays. We have pledge cards, we have sample letters, we have prayers, prayers of the people, in-gathering prayers, prayers over the gifts, things that you can use that tie into that theme. And you're welcome to use them. We present them in both PDF and Word so that you can adapt them if you want to change some words or put your church name in things or whatever. We give them to you in multiple formats so that you can do what you want with it. We really encourage you to be open source and to change up our materials as they apply to you. The keys to the kingdom, the way into the materials this year is through the password that I'm sharing on the screen, and I'll put it in the materials that I send you later. Jeremiah 17:8, 17:8. That gets you access to this year's pledge campaign materials. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to bring us back into our group here and invite you all to ask any questions about forming a stewardship team or what a stewardship committee does, or questions that you have. And if you just have some stewardship basic questions too, we can talk about that.
How, knowing that a lot has changed in the last year, 2, 4 years, I know some congregations, the same people do the same thing every year. How would you approach kind of encouraging new folks to be on the stewardship committee? I don't have the problem of the same 4 people wanting to do this every year. So this isn't necessarily my context, but trying to encourage people who have never done this before.
That's a great question. I think every stewardship team needs some folks who have done it before and who love it, and also some new folks, right? Because you want to train up new people to do this ministry for when the people who've been doing it for a while want to move on to something else. So it's always good to have a mix. And you don't want the group to have to reform every year, right? Oh, it's a whole new group of 4 or 6 people getting together and they've never worked together, because that's just exhausting. So some continuity is really good. But I think, you know, when you're doing your campaign and you get feedback, if you have a conversation with someone and they're telling you, this is why I love the church, or I'm so thank you for asking me for my gift, I'm gonna make it this year. And you get that little hint that maybe they're excited about what you're doing or curious, you know, then we can you can take that note for next year, right? You can say, this is a person I might recruit to be on the stewardship committee. They gave an answer that was a little bit more than, yeah, here's my gift. Maybe they want this. So those are people to pay attention to. I think you should always try and, you know, if you can't find anyone like that, you might think through that list of criteria: people who love people, people who are well respected, people who are deeply connected, people who can get things done, look at your church directory and think about who on that list meets some of those, and then make some personal asks. Take them out for coffee and say, this is a ministry that really matters in this church, and I know you haven't done it before. Would you be willing to serve with me on this? We really need some new ideas. I find that if you're just doing the same stewardship committee and campaign year after year, you're probably also getting the same gifts year after year. And, you know, that can be fine. It's steady, but it doesn't grow. It doesn't change. And our communities grow and change. So we should change up our stewardship programs every once in a while. That's a great question.
No,
Thanks.
thank you. And as I've one thing we tried recently as far as starting to recruit for next year's vestry, of inviting folks together and putting it on them. Give us 3 to 5 names that you would recommend. So you may go to somebody and say, hey, I think you'd be great. But I understand either can you do this or can you recommend somebody?
Yeah,
And I keep it on them.
I think that's great. I also think you should help them by knowing what criteria they're looking for. So it's not just 3 names. It's, so share with them from this slide deck some of those things. Also, in our resource library, in our tools section, you'll see stewardship committee job descriptions. And whenever I'm a volunteer, I like having a job description, just like whenever I'm an employee, I like a job description, because it helps me understand what I'm supposed to do, how many hours I'm supposed to commit to this. And within a campaign, there are different roles, right? There are members, there might be a pledge secretary, there might be the party planner, there might be the chair. And so, they have slightly different roles on your stewardship committee. So take a look at the stewardship committee job posts or job descriptions and give those to your vestry too. And then say, who do you know that meets this, that might that does some of these things, that embodies some of these ideas.
No, that's great. I'm definitely taking notes.
And I'll send you I'll put that in the chat right now, actually.
Hi, this is Diana.
Hi.
We have a congregation that is probably majority either unchurched, as far as never really participated in, churches before, and they are members, or formerly from the Roman Catholic persuasion. And there's a difference between Episcopal churches and anything else. Is there any resources out there, because we're trying to figure out, it's an educational program of some sort to teach people, this is what we do, this is why we do it, these are some of the things that you can do, and the differences in the church. Is there anything that TENS has that could help us with that?
We don't have a specific document, but as you say it, I get asked this question a lot, and maybe we should find someone to write this for us or start to do it, because it's really important. I think here are a couple of ideas that I have. I like to put stewardship information in a newcomer packet, not to say, welcome to the church on your first day, when are you pledging, but more with some information about, this is how our church creates and funds its budget. This is where our money comes from. So it's really helpful for people to know, unlike maybe a Roman Catholic church, our diocese doesn't pay our priest, we pay our priest, right? We get money from everything that we do, from our members or from our investments. And so we are self-funding that way. That's a big shock to some people from other denominations, that we are kind of self-sufficient in that way as Episcopalians. Yes, we're a part of this greater structure that we can rely on the diocese for some assistance, but our diocese don't have never-ending pockets. from which they can continue to fund us. So just knowing that is one thing I like to put into some newcomer information. I also like to talk about, so we do pledges here because that's how our finance committee sets the budget. And we usually do that in the fall so that they can set the budget in the December so that we can vote on it in January at our annual meeting. For some people coming from other faith traditions, that whole process will be big news, right? Because it's very governance focused. We do that work publicly in our finance committee, in our annual meeting. People know the budget and they get to vote on it or have it presented to them. So I like to say that. I also like to talk a little bit about, and this can be tricky, so you have to make sure it works in your church. I like to talk about what the average pledge is and what the median gift is in your church. So helping people know, because often I get the question from newcomers or someone from another tradition, well, I'm used to throwing a couple dollars on the plate when it comes by. What do people give here? And I love it if they ask that question. And I can say, well, on average, we have 200 members and our average gift size is around $2,000 a year per household or whatever it is, right? And then people have a place to start. Oh, okay, it's that much. Or I never thought of that. Or wow, that's not very much at all. I can do that and more. Whatever, it gives them a place to start, but it can be tricky because it also could be the place where they land, right? Maybe they could make $5,000 a month or whatever, right? And you're only asking them for a little. So I like to give them that information. I don't have it all in one place, but maybe that's one of the things I'll work on this summer, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a help for us to get started with us too.
Yeah, newcomer packet with some stewardship information and just basics. This is how we run. It's also really helpful for them to know that we have a vestry, that we elect them, that they make decisions, that it's representational government, and that trickles up to our diocese, that trickles up to the big church. We're a part of a system here, but it's hierarchical in its own way, but you're not absent from the decision like you might be in other denominations. What are some other questions about either stewardship best practices or recruiting a team, or some experiences you've had? What's gone really well or what's fallen flat?
I know I've been at my current congregation. Sorry, I'm opening popsicle right now.
Obstacles are important too.
Priorities. I've been at my current congregation for, this will be 4th year, and trying to create the expectation of vestry. Like I know some vestries are very strong about passing resolutions that with the start of the stewardship committee, we have all raised our pledges, and we encourage all to prayerfully consider that also. Brought that up and it went nowhere. There was and maybe that's just a larger education at this particular congregation. But yeah, we are on the screen. But creating new expectations, I'm realizing takes more than 1, 2, or 5 conversations. Takes a lot of time.
It does. This is why, the term year-round stewardship is scary to some people because it feels like we're going to be talking about money every Sunday or that we're always hounding people. But year-round stewardship is a ministry of planting the seed multiple times throughout the year and in different kinds of activities. It could be a sermon in the middle of the summer about stewardship. It could be a Bible study that meets at some point over the year and looks at some some scriptures. I'm about to share with you in the chat a Bible study that we have for stewardship specifically. So you can do this maybe like if you have a Wednesday night group, or if you have maybe a rector's forum. Here you have about, on the list I just shared with you, got about 30 different Bible passages that have something to say about stewardship. And you can run those sorts of conversations and plant the seed. In fundraising, we usually like to say that it takes 7 times of asking before a gift gets made. And that doesn't have to be ask 1, ask 2, ask 3. It can be planting the seed in various ways, suggesting how we can get involved and suggesting how we can do more. And it's also about then the other side of that is being transparent about how we spend the money and telling the story about our mission and our impact. And that's part of the work I'm doing later this morning, or in other ways, when we tell the story about our stewardship, about the mission and the impact our gifts have on the community, we bring that meaning back into the church and into people's gifts. I like to say that people should be able to tie their money to the mission and know that every dollar we raise is going to mission. We're not just flushing it away. We're good stewards of your money. So throughout the year, telling those stories, keeping up to date on what the budget is, keeping up to date on where pledges stand, are other ways that we plant the seed that we're always thinking and doing this work. That was a good question. Anybody else?
Ray, it looked like you had your hand up. I think you're on mute right now.
Hi, I wanted to offer a couple of observations. One is this idea of year-round stewardship. We're just beginning to do that in another way, and that is to put a little tiny blurb, maybe a 1-sentence or 2-sentence, something related to stewardship in our weekly e-newsletter. And it wouldn't go in every week. It'll go in randomly, maybe every 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be something like what keeps your vestry members up at night, or how do we meet the budget, or maybe it's something about one of our ministries, but it's a way to keep the notion of stewardship in front of the congregation on a more regular basis, rather than try to pack it all into a stewardship campaign that goes from mid-September to late October. Mm-hmm. So your notion of year-round stewardship, we're just I just had a meeting with our rector about that idea, and he thought it was great. So we're going to start doing that. The other thing that we did last year was to create some interviews, and some that were live and some that were videoed with different either longtime members of our church, maybe, and what it meant to them to be a member of our church, the programs, the ministries that we have. We also interviewed a couple of the outreach organizations that we support, and had them come and be interviewed in front of the congregation. Again, just short, 3-4 minutes, not taking up the whole time. But the videos that we dropped into the weekly e-newsletters were really interesting and useful, I think, and we had 5 or 6 of those during the stretch of the campaign, and those were very useful, and I think we're probably going to repeat that again this year. So those are just a couple of thoughts that we certainly don't have all the answers either. We're like everybody else on the call today. We're looking to how do we do it more effectively. And those are just a couple of ideas that I thought I'd share with everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing those. You guys are really ahead of the game in a lot of ways by doing that work. You just said it doesn't have to be a big message every week. Those little planting the seed throughout the year, little mentions, it just reminds us. And so kudos, congratulations, go with it. That's going to be really great. I think you'll see results. I think the worst thing in stewardship is that when fall comes around and it feels like it's a surprise. Oh, we're raising money again. Like, no, we do this every fall. Or the people who are like, oh, it's October, I'm skipping church for a month. No, don't do that either. We're going to do some things that make it easy for you. So I love that you're doing it in those little ways. The other thing you said that I think is absolutely essential is the storytelling. And stewardship should be about storytelling, really, at the end of the day, I think, because that's what motivates us. Budgets, they don't motivate, right? They're important. We have to do them. We see them. We know them. But that's not why I write my check or make my gift to church. I give to church because I care about what's happening. And the way I learn about what's happening is when people talk about it. We're very bad in the Episcopal Church about patting ourselves on the back for some of the great things that we do and for sharing the stories of our success. And I like modesty. It's a good virtue, but also we should really be talking about it when things go well. So I like to say, you know, it's really good if you have a food program. It's even better to say how many people you feed every week by it, because that helps people say, oh, this ministry has real impact. The community needs it. And when you can have people from that ministry, either volunteers or whatever, come in and say, I show up every Thursday night to serve soup because it means this to me, and this is how easy it was to get involved. And I love the communication I have with the people who come through the line. Then they're telling a story about their mission and their ministry. It's so much more interesting coming from them than it is if it comes from me telling their story, right? So when we get people to share their own story, it's so authentic. So Ray, you guys are right on it. Good work. Keep going. This is really great. You guys, I mean, your diocese has a long commitment of stewardship ministry. And I know that many of you know what you're doing. And I really appreciate that. It makes our role easier when we can come in and support you in the great things that you're already doing. And you have some really good practices there.
Davey, thanks so much for all the work that you do through TENS and the work that you've done today. I feel like the annual journey of stewardship, we kind of need those rest stops, those refreshers. So I appreciate the time and energy that you've given us today.
You bet. Well, thank you. I think we've come to the end. It sounds like our questions have trickled to an end. And we can release ourselves to a beautiful Saturday. Please, I'm going to send you a link to sign up for the TENS newsletter. We do trainings like this on a national scale all year round. You're welcome to join those. Father Robert and I will be talking about other ways that TENS can do work like this in the Diocese of Louisiana. The TENS board was able to come to New Orleans in January and get energized by the work you were doing and meet some of your diocesan staff and stewardship leaders. And it's really inspiring. Your diocese is doing great work. And I know that you get hit with a lot in terms of weather and disaster and life. And you're doing great ministry for your communities in the midst of all that. So we really appreciated being there. So thank you for the work you're doing. We'll
Thank
be
you.
in touch soon.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
All right, continued Easter blessings, friends. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.